Hello, Andrew Colsky here. We've got another individual with OCD who is joining us all the way from India. This is Virendra, and he is going to tell us his story about when he first learned about OCD and what he has gone through to deal with it. So welcome, Virendra. Thank you. Could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Thank you, Andrew. I'm Virendra Upadhyay. Uh, I'm 32 years old from New Delhi, India, and I'm working as a software engineer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. So thank you for joining us. Obviously, there's a big time zone difference, but we found a time that worked for both of us.
Yeah.
So we're sharing stories with viewers about OCD and how people can even recognize that they have OCD. So could you share your story? Like, when did you first think that something might have been going on that you eventually found to be OCD?
Sure. It was back in 2007, February, when I first started seeing the symptoms of OCD um, coming up to the surface. And at that point, it was very confusing as to I had no understanding of uh, how debilitating this could be and what was going on as to uh, you know it was starting to gradually you know put me in a state where even getting things done in the day-to-day life was getting too difficult to handle. I would say it was um, somewhere around the mid of February 2007, and I was preparing for my 10th grade examinations when I started this uh, pattern of repeating the words and sentences over and over again, just to ensure that I have understood the text of the book completely and I have thoroughly memorized it. Uh, at first, it was very confusing. I had no idea why I was doing that, why I was repeating those words and sentences. Uh, and it was gradually worsening. It went to a stage wherein I was compelled to pronounce the words right. Uh, I had an urge to, you know, memorize each and every word of the book uh, with a hope that that would be the only way to excel in the examinations. But it took me 2.5 years before I could convince myself that this is something that is beyond my control and this would require some professional uh, intervention.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not something that I can deal with it alone.
Right. Well, let me stop you and ask something about what you were talking about there. When you first started to realize that you had this need to reread and memorize the book and those types of things, you said you realized something was not right, but is that something that you felt that you could share with your friends or your teachers, or did you feel like you were maybe embarrassed and you needed to hide it from them?
At first, I was not embarrassed at it. Um, I was an extrovert, and I had a good peer group wherein I could share my thoughts without the fear of being judged or being ridiculed. So my first reaction to it was to discuss this with my friends. So I had I put it across them and I told them that this is something that I feel I have this constant urge to memorize it and just do it perfectly.
Mhm.
Um, at first, the reactions that I got from them were that it was, I think, that they too, they mentioned that they are also, you know, feeling the same. But then, gradually I realized that, it is not the same, because because you don't get the right amount of words to, you know explain that, this is not a compulsion. In some cases, for me it was a compulsion. For them, it was uh, something that was a that would, I mean, it would be a facility for them to, have those kind of thoughts to repeat, so that they can, you know strengthen their studies.
Mhm.
um, you know for me it was, if I had not read the sentence, or I had not pronounced the sentence correctly, uh, I'm not doing things right. For
Right.
them, it was the case that if they do it again, it would just, reinforce their learning. There's a very, I would say, marginal difference in both the thoughts. But for me, it was something that I couldn't help it, whereas they had the choice to put a stop to it and move ahead.
Right.
So
So,
that was something that I I realized, and it took me some time to realize that it's not the same in my case and for them.
mhm. So then
Yeah.
you have this realization, something's going on, you recognize it's different from what your friends are experiencing. So when do you first identify it as potential OCD? Okay. So my question to you was, you were recognizing that something was a little bit different about the way you were studying and from what your friends were describing. And so I was asking, when did you first recognize that it might be OCD?
Okay. So it was only after 2.5 years that I felt that this needs um, some professional help, and
Mhm.
this could be something that, you know would require external help, and I cannot uh, do it, you know alone. And there was one particular incident that triggered me to believe this, and that was, we had been given an assignment, and I had completed that assignment way before the deadlines. But we had a peer group, the study group, and you know we used to collaborate for studies, and my assignment um, probably went to all of the other uh, peers, and it was probably a few days before the submission deadline that I got the assignment, and I could see that the pages were soiled, they were folded, the filing holes were torn, and they were not stacked up, you know, perfectly in the order, one above the other. And I could not resist myself but to, do the entire assignment again. uh, and it was very exhausting uh, to complete that, just before the deadline once again, when there was no need for it.
Mhm.
I could have submitted the assignment and still receive my grades. But then it was completely illogical and irrational. But I had this urge that the pages need to be stacked, one above the other, exactly one on top of the other, and pages need to be, you know, perfectly clean. Um, and yeah, after the submission, I discussed this with my parents, and I think at this moment, um, I think we felt that we should go and seek professional help. And
Okay.
the doctor did, after hearing this particular incident, he did confirm that this could be OCD.
Mhm. So when you decided to seek professional help, how what type of decision did you have to make as to who that professional would be? Like, how did you know who to go to?
Okay. So I actually had one of my father's friend who was dealing with the the sale of medical devices,
Mm-hmm.
and he had you know some of the contacts with the medical fraternity, and he was the one who I felt would be the right person to guide me through. Or if if probably he didn't have an idea, he could circulate a word in his group and uh, get some recommendations about who should we see.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I did that. I did speak to him, and yeah, he suggested uh, a doctor, a psychiatrist,
Okay.
um, and yeah, we went to see him the next day.
Great.
But at that point in time, I did not understand the difference between psychiatrist, a psychologist, or a psychotherapist. Um, so yeah, I think we just went by what he had to suggest.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm glad you bring that up because I think a lot of people have that same confusion. And just give me a second to share with the audience that, a psychiatrist is a medical doctor who deals with mental health type of issues. A psychologist is typically someone who has a PhD in psychology and is trained a lot, different types, but in testing and in actual clinical practice. So there's a lot of different types of psychologists. And then a psychotherapist, or some places call it a mental health counselor or a therapist. Those are people who typically have a master's degree level and work a lot with talk therapy in many cases, exposure therapy. So those are just the general differences, just some education for the audience. But you saw a psychiatrist, and
Yes.
what did that psychiatrist tell you? How did he treat you?
Okay. So probably I vividly described my symptoms, and I think he must have felt that I was under tremendous stress, and the first uh, uh, treatment that he thought would be the right treatment to start with was to prescribe tranquilizers. And uh, actually I did start the medication course, and it since the tranquilizers were probably high dosage tranquilizers, I could see that you know it was uh, I used to sleep for around 12 to 15 hours a day, and for the rest of the time I would constantly feel dizziness, and would feel as if I'm in a some kind of a virtual world. So it was difficult for me to make out whether I was sleeping or whether I was awake. So
Wow.
so much so was the you know impact that uh, I felt the medication had on me.
Wow,
And yeah, and it had started uh, you know conflicting with my day-to-day tasks, getting things done. I had to balance between the the college assignments, the some of the household responsibilities, and so I ultimately had to you know give up on medication, because I could not at that point in time afford to sleep for 17 hours a day.
yeah. Wow. So so how long were you on medication before you stopped it?
Around 15-20 days.
Oh, okay. Okay. And
Yes.
so when you stopped the medication because it was just making you too sleepy, what happened? What did you do next?
um I since that attempt to get things correct, had failed, um, you know, I I somehow realized that, I'll have to deal with it myself. you know, the medication was going to be something that would require probably some amount of putting aside the other things completely, and that you know at that point in time I didn't have that kind of a you know freedom, since my studies were going on, the college examinations, the submissions, so it was getting too difficult. So I stopped the medication. I again tried to deal with it by myself. uh, yeah.
Wow. So at some point, did you then seek out additional help from anyone else?
It was much later that I you know uh, I when I stopped medication, what I did was used to read about these, or Google things up on the internet, trying to see what could be the alternatives to it, or what are there similar experiences that people might have shared on internet. And it was much later that I you know again started seeing, but this time it a professional, but this time it was you know uh, a CBT therapy. So it was a psychotherapist and not a psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
And I still remember I went to him and I told him that, but this time I was a working professional. I was no longer a student. So I did try to explain to him that, having some kind of tranquilizer which would, uh, induce sleep, or kind of, you know, provide relief to nervousness, or things like that, is not going to help, because I have a 10-hour long job and I cannot afford to skip that. So yeah, that is where we decided that CBT is the course that we are going to try next.
Fantastic. So after you started the CBT, bring us up to date today. How are you doing today?
Yes. It had helped me a lot. It had, you know, kind of brought me from a state of complete hopelessness to restoring a good amount of hope that, there is hope for people who are facing these issues. And it can be, you know, done through simple steps, like, you know, meditation. And I think starting very, very small is probably the key. um, 5 minutes, 10 minutes meditation, or simple affirmations, that could be a start to your efforts to dealing with it, and slowly, you know increasing the amount, and pushing yourself to uh, you know exposing yourself deliberately to the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
that's how it started.
yeah, and you and I had a chance to talk before, and I think one of the things you said you did was you would read a sentence and you would limit the number of times you allowed yourself to read it. Is that right?
Yes, correct. I would stop myself at 3 iterations, and no looking back, or going to you know rereading those words or sentences again after I have read them for 3 times. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's a hard stop that I had put myself.
yeah, and I'm sure that was probably pretty hard to do the first time that you did it, right?
Yes, yes,
But
it was very hard, very difficult. Uh, so much so that it would, you would constantly feel that you are not in the present, and your mind is dragging you back to that sentence that you read 5 minutes ago.
mhm.
Yeah.
So if it's okay with you, I'd like to ask a little bit about some of the cultural either similarities or differences between OCD and how it's seen in India versus in the US. And I'll just share for me, I'm in Virginia in the US. And in general, I think that there's more awareness coming, but I think there's still a large lack of awareness in the US about OCD. And so I think people who have OCD, first, maybe they're not clear on what it is. And I think there's a degree of shame that comes from it, and that they don't want to tell others about it because they feel shame. But once they do kind of reach out and get help, I think we have some, pretty good treatment available for them. We have therapists who focus on OCD. We have psychiatrists who understand it. We have, a good medical community once you get to the right people. So in India, how is it? Is there a stigma? What is the treatment like? Tell us about that.
Sure. So there certainly is some amount of stigma attached to the mental health issues, and you know, you don't readily uh, get help. At the same time, it's also very difficult to convince um, people around you to, um, help you get some professional help. Um, so I think, but the situation has improved a lot. There is um, much more awareness now as compared to that, that was prevalent at that point in time back in 2007, 2008. Um, I think I would like to attribute this awareness to you know the access to internet that we have today. Um, people have shared their experiences. There are communities that are willing to help people. Uh, people can reach out to them, and I think people and there are many survivors themselves who have you know um, I would say started and have taken some of the initiatives that can help people who are suffering from OCD. Um, the first challenge I uh, I mean, that's how I see it. The first challenge for anyone who is facing these issues is the realization that this is something that is uh, not just a temporary uh, confusion or a state of mind, but this is something that is a long-term, long-term pattern, and you know, um, to admit that this is, they are not uh, being able to cope with it. That is something that is, you know, the most challenging aspect to it. I see it that way. Um, and by the time they realize, uh, you know, uh, it also, I would say it adds to the confusion gradually. And you try things out, you fail, you again try things, you again fail, and it's like a constant loop of failures that you go through before you finally decide that you need to see someone. And probably it is only after someone or a professional validates that yes, this is, or this could be something of this sort. uh, I think it kind of reinforces some amount of hope that yes, this could be dealt with.
Mhm.
um, yeah. Um, but yeah, again, answering your question, uh, I think there is certainly much improvement in this aspect today as
Mhm.
compared to the previous times. Yes.
Great, great. And that's, one of the reasons that we do this podcast is to bring awareness so people can recognize what might be going on for them and hear that there's someone else just like me, just dealing with the
Yes.
same thing. So I am curious to ask you, when you decided to seek out CBT therapy, um, in India, is it easy to find someone? Is it hard to find someone? What is access like?
Okay. Okay. So from my experience, I see that every case needs to be handled differently. You cannot have one fixed strategy that would work for you know each and every individual who goes to see a doctor
Hmm.
or a therapist. Uh, so at point, I mean, at certain times, I do feel that the psychotherapists, uh, you know, they have this responsibility to hear the patient's problems, try to reach the core, and then, you know, adopt a strategy that works. And even then, I would say it has to be a lot of patience from both the ends, from patients end as well as from the therapist's end, to kind of implement a strategy, monitor it, see if it is leading to certain uh, you know the achievements could be small, but then it has to have some amount of you know improvement. And you know and they should be also willing to change it if the need is to do that,
Hmm.
because you know um, I mean, each case is different. I think that way. And not I mean, there's no fixed template and strategy that can work for every patient.
Right.
So
Right.
I think sometimes the psychotherapists are not very willing to do that, or probably it's their bias which is preventing them to do that. But yeah, sometimes I found really good psychotherapists who are you know very patient, and they do you know inform the patient um, in the beginning itself that this is going to be a long journey and not something that you know uh, would do magic
Right.
within a short amount of time. Yeah.
Right. Right.
So that understanding has to be a conscious effort from both the ends.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so when you like here in the US, for example, we don't have a national healthcare system, and I know it's a big political discussion that's going on, but the reality is right now, you have some people who have no insurance, you have some people who have insurance, and when it comes to treatment for OCD, typically it ends up being self-pay. You pay out of your own pocket. How is it in India from the payment perspective?
Okay. um I had not seen you know insurance providing uh, you know facilities or cover for mental health so far, until very recently, when I saw that the insurance providers have now become uh, you know uh, aware of, and they have made and included those changes in their policies as well. So at least I think in terms of the insurance partners, when they collaborate with organizations as a part of the employee insurance program, they have included uh, care and insurance uh, support for mental health diseases as well. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So it seems like you're making a lot of progress towards mental health care.
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. Wow. Okay. So, so you've told us your story, and it's very interesting for you to take us through that journey. So, if somebody is watching this video and they're recognizing similar things for themselves, and it says, you know what, the same stuff he's dealing with, I'm dealing with. What would be your best advice for them if they're just starting to recognize that maybe they have OCD? What should they do?
Um, okay. So first thing is, there is absolutely no shame in going and seeking professional help. You know, it does not matter. And the most of the practitioners are mindful of maintaining the confidentiality. So anyone who has slightest of the doubts regarding confidentiality, or whether it puts them any uh, you know in any situation where they will be embarrassed or they will not be accepted, um, I would suggest, um, leave aside those thoughts for you know just an hour. Okay, and go and seek professional help. There's nothing wrong in it, nothing wrong. I can say that probably when once you see the professional help, and the professional uh, validates or confirms that this is indeed something, trust me, you would feel better. And 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 I think there is help. So trust that there is help. There are enough individuals out there who are willing to help. There is a lot of community support. Will eventually reach there. Yeah.
Right. Well, I really appreciate the fact that you were willing to come and share your story and, enlighten us about how this works. And it's very interesting to me to be able to learn about the different cultural ways that different countries and different cultures treat OCD. So that's always an interesting part for me, and I appreciate you sharing. So I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to share this and do this for our audience. And I wish you the most success in everything that you're doing. And I hope that, OCD is something you can put in the past as best that you can.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And I think I would like to congratulate you also, to you know having taken this initiative, wherein you are trying to convey, by connecting with people who have faced these issues themselves, uh, and spread the awareness. So yeah, that's a very commendable job that you're doing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.